For those who know me already, I'm not a fan of regulation, especially when it's applied indiscriminately to pretty much any new technology. So yes, I'm not a fan of regulation when it comes to the UI Act, which is going to be the topic of the day. We all know that Europe has turned some kind of rule making into a primary export since they don't really produce the technology; they just regulate it. But the UI Act addresses something real in this case, which is, in my opinion, very different from what the GDPR was doing a few years ago, which is not AI danger, but vendor manufactured hype, behavioral extraction at scale, and of course, a dependency loop being engineered into the daily life of people. Now, I've spent many years building AI systems, some of them of high stakes environments at Amethyst Technologies, which is my company, where the gap between what a model claims and what it actually does has concrete consequences. So, when I say the current AI ecosystem has a manipulation problem, I'm not channeling, pessimism as some of you might think. I'm more describing a pattern that I truly recognize from the inside. So let's get into the UI Act. UI Act is not a technically sophisticated document. I had the pleasure to read it, 135 articles. It took a while, but large parts of this document were clearly written by people who have never probably trained a machine learning model in their career. But the underlying instinct that something here needs structural limits before it normalizes itself into invisibility is, in my opinion, correct. So the problem is not AI, it's in fact the hype machine around it. And if you are following this show, you definitely know or should know by now what my opinions are on the subject. Artificial intelligence is not dangerous the way, for example, a bioweapon is dangerous. Current large language models are, as I said many times, and many other folks out there think the same, these are autocomplete systems with impressive pattern matching. They hallucinate, they confabulate, they produce confident nonsense sometimes with the same fluency as accurate output. That's a real engineering problem, but of course it's a manageable one. So, what's less manageable is the manufactured reality that is surrounding all these tools that we probably use, even you and I for sure, every day. Every major AI vendor has built a communication apparatus that is designed to conflate capability with magic. Benchmark results most of the time cherry picked to maximize press coverage, demos staged with curated inputs, terminology borrowed from sci-fi, to make statistical inference sound like, I don't know, sentience or cognition. The echo chamber is not accidental; it's a distribution strategy of the vendors. I've watched this cycle with every AI product release for the past 3 years, even though I'm dealing with artificial intelligence since 2001. In fact, a new model drops. The launch event is some kind of TED talk equivalent. The benchmark claims are cited without methodology. Of course, all the demos that you see during launch are not reproducible. The press cycles run continuously. The stock moves, and you keep observing this. It's already the fourth year that we are seeing this. So this is not science communication. It is manufactured consensus. The naming game running at scale. If you ever looked at the previous episode on YouTube and also on the official website datascienceathome.com, in which I explicitly talk about the naming game, about information spreading. Now, what you are actually handing over? Well, Facebook's data extraction back in the days looked pretty bad in hindsight. Now, what's happening at the moment is structurally different if you think. So, when you use a modern large language model assistant for work, for example, you're not just sharing data points, but you're feeding it your reasoning patterns, your decision frameworks, your vocabulary, your professional judgment calls, your doubts, your draft thinking, and over time, the model that trained on millions of users like you learns to predict not just what you will say, but how you will think about something, of course. And then it starts to substitute for that thinking. That's the typical trajectory of these type of models. And this is the dependency loop. It's not hypothetical. I've watched it happen in technical teams when engineers stop debugging problems because the model debugs faster, when researchers stop forming independent hypotheses because the model synthesizes faster. The capability, of course, is real. I'm not here to be hyper negative about all this, but the erosion is also real. The problem isn't that AI helps. It's that the help is deliberately designed to be replaceable in some kind of way. Switching costs are engineered in, and we are seeing that if you read the news of the last few weeks. Context accumulates in proprietary systems. The more you use it, the less you can do without it. We thought that Facebook was extracting our social graph. Well, large language models are extracting the entire cognitive substrate underneath. So let's go back to the EUI Act because I promised that this is going to be the topic of the day. What the EUI Act actually says that matters on the topic. Well, most commentary on the Act focuses on the risk tiers and the compliance burden. Those matter for enterprises. Of course, for everyone else, a few specific provisions are worth knowing. So let me start from a list of articles. There are more than 130, but I chose I think 5 or 6 articles that, in my opinion, you should be paying attention to. Your compliance officer doesn't read Python, and your engineers don't read Article 14 of the EU AI Act. That gap, that's where fines come from. Drift by Amethyst closes it. Point it at your GitHub, GitLab, or Bitbucket repo, or provide a project requirement description documents, and it reads your code the way a lawyer reads a contract, and reads, of course, the EU AI Act the way your CTO reads a stock trace. And no, your code never has to leave your infrastructure. You can run Drift on-premise or in your own cloud, it's your choice. Drift doesn't guess. It maps what your system actually does, line by line, to the exact article. Risk classification, transparency, human oversight, data governance, you name it. Then it hands you a compliance score, a risk register, and a report that your regulator will actually accept. The lawyer who can code, you can say, or the coder who knows the law. Either way, it reads your code before Brussels does. Check it out at drift.amethyst.com. So the first is Article 5 about prohibited practices. And this is the article that bans AI systems designed to exploit psychological vulnerabilities or use some kind of subliminal manipulation to alter the behavior of the user. It also bans social scoring by public authorities and real-time biometric surveillance in public spaces, of course, with some narrow exceptions. The manipulation prohibition is the most important clause for everyday users. It directly targets systems designed to create dependency or exploit emotional states to steer behavior. And practically speaking, it should apply pressure on the design of, for example, a recommendation engine or conversational agent built to maximize engagement over utility. Then we have Article 50, which is about transparency obligations. Any AI system that interacts with humans must disclose it is not human. Deepfakes must be labeled as synthetic. AI-generated content must be machine detectable. So this one sounds, in my opinion, quite obvious, which it isn't. Right now, most AI-generated content circulates without any type of labeling. The norm being established is you have a right to know when you are talking to a machine. And that's a floor worth setting, in my opinion, even if enforcement is going to be slow and in some cases also quite impossible. Then we have Article 86, right to explanation. This is a very good one, in my opinion. For high risk AI systems, think about hiring, credit, education, healthcare, law enforcement. Individuals have a right to a meaningful explanation of any decision that significantly affects them. So this is the article that should matter most to people who have been rejected, for example, by an automated hiring system or denied insurance by a risk model or even flagged by a fraud detection algorithm. The right to an explanation is the right to not be subject to, this black box machine without any possibility of recourse. It's quicker than it should be. Meaningful explanation, of course, is not defined with precision, so there are some gaps there, and the burden is placed on the deployer, not on the vendor. But the principle, in my opinion, is correct. Definitely, there is room for improvement, as in many forms of legislation. Probably it will come, probably not. The principle stays, and in my opinion, is correct. Then we have Article 13. I go a few articles back just to maintain the logical flow of this conversation. Transparency for high-risk systems. So we are again on high-risk systems. Systems classified as high risk must provide documentation allowing human oversight. Right? User interacting with these systems must receive information that is sufficient to interpret the output correctly. And this, of course, includes limitations, the type of data used, and what the system is not designed to do. The second half of that last point matters more than the first, in my opinion, because AI vendors are extremely communicative about what their systems can do, but they are almost entirely silent about what the systems get wrong, under what conditions, and of course, for which populations. So, what doesn't work in the UI Act? Of course, these are my personal opinions, and I would love to know yours. So, feel free to reach out. We have a Discord channel. You can join freely anytime and have a chat with us. So, the Act's risk classification will be gamed. That's my personal opinion. Vendors will architect systems to fall just below the high risk thresholds. The compliance infrastructure will most of the time absorb enormous resources from organizations that pose low real risk, while the actual high risk deployments move through jurisdictions with lighter oversight. We have seen this, why not seeing it again? The enforcement timeline is also optimistic. There is full applicability for most provisions that runs through 2026 and 2027. Now, in AI development cycles, that's geological time, if you think. The landscape will have shifted before the rules are legible to the systems they are meant to govern. We are seeing models and architectures and agents on a weekly basis, maybe even faster than that. And of course, the Act still treats AI primarily as a product category subject to market regulation, not as an infrastructure layer reshaping cognition and political economy. That framing will limit its long term effectiveness. So, what smart actors are already doing? Well, companies outside the EU are already building EU compliant versions of their products because the alternative is, of course, losing the market entirely, of course, the European market. And this is the so-called Brussels effect in practice. Regulatory standards set in one jurisdiction become de facto global standards because the compliance cost of divergence exceeds most of the time the cost of uniformity. We have seen that with GDPR and data privacy. And this means that the AI Act's provisions will eventually affect products and behaviors outside of Europe, regardless of where users are located. The transparency labels, the explanation rights, the manipulation prohibitions, these will propagate through supply chains, whether the vendor is in Frankfurt or San Francisco or Brussels itself. Now, what this creates slowly is a floor. It's not a ceiling, not a guarantee of good outcomes, not a substitute for any technical literacy, but a documented, legally enforceable floor below which certain practices cannot legally go. And given where the baseline currently sits, that floor matters. So, what comes next? Well, 12 months from now, well, actually less, the conversation will shift from compliance to enforcement. The first high profile cases under the Act will define what the prohibitions actually mean in practice. So expect the manipulation provisions to be the site of the most significant legal disputes because they're the most consequential and, of course, the least technically precise. The larger question is whether regulatory floors create some kind of space for different AI products to compete, or whether they simply add friction without changing incentives. Well, that depends almost entirely on whether enforcement is credible. For users, the Act gives you rights that didn't formally exist before. You can now ask what an AI system was designed to do, under what conditions it was tested, and of course, on what basis it made a certain decision about you. Whether you exercise those rights, of course, is your call, but you should know they exist. In the next episode, of course, I will tell you what is wrong about the AI Act and, in particular, about the institutional practices that created it. Stay tuned.